The changes began subtly. So subtly that at first I thought it was merely my deteriorating mind imposing patterns where none existed. It started with the fish. Local fishermen began reporting strange catches, deep-sea species that had no business being in shallow waters. Creatures with malformed bodies, extra fins, eyes in wrong places. Some glowed faintly in the dark, a sickly bioluminescence that reminded me too much of the crystals in that underwater statue's eyes. The fishermen threw them back, refusing to speak of what they had caught. But I saw their faces. I recognized the expression. It was the same look I saw in my mirror each morning. The haunted eyes of someone who has glimpsed something they wish they could forget. Then came the dreams. People in Innsmouth began experiencing nightmares. Not the ordinary anxieties of sleep, but shared visions. Dozens of residents reported the same dream. Vast cities beneath the waves, cyclopean architecture, and something massive stirring in the deep. The local doctor prescribed sleeping pills and spoke of mass hysteria, but I knew better. They were hearing the call. Weaker than what I experienced, diluted by distance and lesser sensitivity, but present nonetheless. The ocean itself was changing. The water temperature had dropped 3 degrees in 2 weeks, an anomaly that marine biologists from Boston came to investigate. They took samples, measured currents, and left looking troubled. One of them, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, stopped by the lighthouse before departing. "The water chemistry is wrong," she told me, her voice carrying an edge of fear she was trying to hide. "We're detecting compounds that shouldn't exist at these depths. Organic molecules that don't match anything in our databases. It's as if something is leaching into the ocean from below." I wanted to tell her, wanted to warn her to leave and never return. But the words died in my throat. What could I say that wouldn't sound like madness? Instead, I offered her tea and watched as she drove away, hoping she would forget what she had found. But she didn't leave. 3 days later, I found her boat anchored near the ruins. I took my own boat out, dread building in my chest. When I reached her vessel, it was empty. Her diving equipment was gone. She had gone down. I waited for hours, but she never surfaced. Eventually, I had no choice but to notify the Coast Guard. They searched for 2 days before declaring it a tragic diving accident. Her body was never found. I knew where she was. I knew that somewhere in those underwater passages, there was now a 14th alcove waiting to be filled. Dr. Chen had been sensitive enough to sense the wrongness in the water, and that sensitivity had doomed her. The threshold was calling more strongly now, reaching out to anyone who could hear. 2 weeks passed. The alignment was less than 2 months away, and the signs were accelerating. The lighthouse beacon began to malfunction. It would flicker at irregular intervals. And sometimes, I swear this is true, it would pulse in rhythm with the breathing sounds from the ocean, as if the lighthouse itself was synchronizing with whatever stirred below. I tried to research the stellar alignment. I pored over Edmund's astronomical charts, cross-referenced them with modern star maps. The configuration was indeed rare, a pattern that occurred roughly once every 1,000 years. Ancient civilizations had marked it. The Mayans had a glyph for it. Egyptian texts mentioned it in veiled references. Every culture that had looked up at the stars and tried to find meaning in their positions had, at some point, noticed this particular arrangement. And every time it had occurred, there were records of strange events. Mass disappearances near coastlines, entire fishing villages found abandoned, ships discovered adrift with no crew. The accounts were scattered across cultures and centuries, but the pattern was unmistakable. Something had always happened when the stars aligned, and each time humanity had collectively chosen to forget, to rationalize, to move on. But this time would be different. I could feel it. The barrier had been weakening for millennia, thinned by each previous alignment. This time, it would break entirely. I found a visitor on my doorstep one morning. An old man, perhaps in his 80s, leaning heavily on a cane. His eyes were the pale blue of deep ice. And when he looked at me, I felt he was seeing past my flesh to something deeper. "You're the new keeper," he said. It wasn't a question. His accent was local, but old, the way people from Innsmouth spoke generations ago. "May I come in?" I let him in, though every instinct screamed caution. He settled into Edmund's old chair and studied me for a long moment. "My name is Ezra Marsh," he said finally. Edmund was my cousin. More than that, he was my friend. I was the one who found his body on the beach. I said nothing. I waited. "You've been down there," Ezra continued. "To the city. You've seen them, I can tell. It changes a man, that sight. Changes something fundamental." "How do you know about the city?" I asked, finding my voice. Ezra smiled, but there was no humor in it. "My family has known about it for 300 years, longer perhaps. We came here because of it. We built Innsmouth to watch over the threshold, to keep others away, but we failed. Generation after generation, we failed. The lighthouse always finds a keeper. The city always claims its witnesses." He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather-bound book, even older than the journals I had found in the alcoves. "This has been passed down through my family. Translations of inscriptions found in ruins along this coast. Fragments of knowledge gathered over centuries. I want you to have it." I took the book with trembling hands. The leather was worn smooth by countless hands before mine. "Why give this to me?" "Because you're the 13th keeper, and according to our records, the 13th is special. The 12 before you were witnesses. But you might be something more. You might be a participant." "I don't understand." Ezra stood slowly, painfully. "You will. When the time comes, you'll have to make a choice. The book will help you understand what that choice means." He moved toward the door, then paused. Edmund tried to fight it, tried to stop what was coming. That's why he made his final descent. Not to witness, but to try to break the cycle. He failed, of course. "But perhaps you won't." "Wait," I called as he opened the door. "What choice? What am I supposed to do?" Ezra looked back at me, and for a moment I saw profound sadness in those icy eyes. "Read the book. You don't have much time. The stars are moving into position. And when they align, the choice will present itself. What you decide will matter more than you can possibly imagine." He left, and I never saw him again. Later, I learned that Ezra Marsh had died in his sleep that very night, the last of a bloodline that had guarded terrible secrets for 3 centuries. I read his book through the night. The translations were fragmentary, often contradictory, but a picture emerged. The beings that slept beneath the ocean were not invaders. They had been here first. Earth had been their world long before humanity emerged. They had built vast civilizations, practiced sciences that made our physics look like children's games, and reshaped the planet according to their will. But something had happened. A cosmic event, a shift in stellar configurations that had turned the conditions of Earth against them. They had been forced to retreat, to enter a state of suspended animation in deep places where the old conditions still held. There they had waited, dreaming for the stars to come right again. The threshold, the ruins beneath the lighthouse, was not just a city, it was a gateway, a controlled breach point between their realm and ours. And the lighthouse above was the key that would open that gateway fully when the alignment occurred. But here was the crucial part, the part that made Ezra's words about choice suddenly terrifying. The gateway required a willing participant to open it fully. The barrier would weaken during the alignment, yes. But to break it entirely, to allow them to return to the surface world in their full power, someone had to consciously choose to open the way. The 12 previous keepers had all refused. They had witnessed, documented, perhaps even descended one final time, but they had not opened the gateway. They had died with the secret, and the barrier had held. Weakened, but held. I was the 13th. And according to the inscriptions Ezra had translated, 13 was significant in their mathematics, a number of completion, of cycles closing. The 13th keeper would not be given the luxury of refusal. The choice would be forced. The signs intensified. Strange lights appeared in the sky at night. Not auroras, but patterns of luminescence that hurt to look at directly. Animals began behaving erratically. Dogs howled at the ocean. Birds flew inland in massive flocks, abandoning the coast. Even insects seemed to sense something wrong. The usual sounds of crickets and cicadas had ceased entirely. Innsmouth was emptying. Families were leaving without explanation, abandoning homes that had been in their families for generations. The town that had once had a population of nearly 2,000 now held perhaps 300 souls. And those who remained had a strange look about them. Not frightened, but expectant. Waiting. I discovered why when I ventured into town for supplies. I saw them gathering at the old church on the waterfront, the building that had been abandoned for decades. Through the broken windows, I glimpsed what they were doing. The interior had been transformed. The Christian symbols had been torn down or covered. In their place were others, the same symbols I had seen carved into the ruins below. They were preparing, not to fight what was coming, but to welcome it. I tried to confront one of them, a man I recognized as the owner of the general store. He looked at me with eyes that seemed somehow wrong. The pupils too large, the irises too dark. "You feel it too," he said. "The call, the promise of change. They're coming back, Keeper. And when they do, everything will be different. Better." Better? I couldn't keep the horror from my voice. "You've seen them. You know what they are." "I've dreamed of them," he corrected. "And yes, they're beyond our understanding. But that's not the same as evil. They ruled this world once. They'll rule it again. And those of us who welcome them, who help prepare the way, will have a place in the new order." I fled back to the lighthouse, my mind reeling. How many had been touched by the dreams? How many had been corrupted by the promise of power, of significance in a cosmos that normally cared nothing for humanity? I thought I had understood my isolation. I thought I alone bore the burden of knowledge. But I was wrong. The knowledge was spreading, the influence was growing, and I was not the only one who would face a choice when the alignment came. That night, I had a visitor of a different kind. I woke to find someone standing in my bedroom, not Ezra, not one of the townspeople. This figure was wrong, too tall, too thin. Its proportions were subtly off in ways that made my eyes hurt to track. "Keeper," it said, and its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "The time approaches. You have read the words of those who came before. You understand now what is required." "I won't open the gateway," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I won't help you." The figure tilted its head at an angle that no human neck could achieve. "You misunderstand. You have already helped us. Every keeper has helped us. Each descent into our city, each moment of understanding, each record of our existence, all of it has weakened the barrier. Your belief makes us real. Your knowledge gives us power. Then why do you need me to open the gateway?" "Because we require permission, consent. A bridge between our realm and yours cannot be forced. It must be offered. 12 have refused. But you are the 13th, and 13 is the number of transformation, of endings that become beginnings. What if I refuse like the others?" The figure seemed to smile, though it had nothing resembling a mouth. Then the cycle continues. The barrier remains weakened but holds. We continue to dream, and our dreams continue to touch your world. More will hear us. More will be changed. And in another 1,000 years, when the stars align again, there will be a 26th keeper, and then a 39th. Eventually, one will say yes. Time means nothing to us. We have already waited for aeons. We can wait for more. But you'd prefer I opened it now. We would prefer, the figure agreed, to wake rather than dream, to exist rather than merely influence. And in return, we offer you something no other keeper has been offered. Understanding. Complete, total understanding of the cosmos. Knowledge of how reality truly functions. Your species gropes in darkness, building theories on shadows. We can show you the light if you're brave enough to look directly at it. It was tempting. God help me. It was tempting. To know. To truly understand. Wasn't that what had driven me from the beginning? The need to know what Edmund had found. To see what lay beneath the waves. I need time to think, I said. Time is something you have very little of, the figure replied. 23 days until the alignment reaches its peak. 23 days until the barrier is thin enough for the choice to be made. Consider carefully, Keeper. The door will open with you or without you. But if you open it willingly, you will be remembered, honored, changed into something greater than human. The figure dissolved like smoke, and I was alone again. But the room felt different, wrong, as if its presence had altered something fundamental about the space. I spent the following days in feverish research. I read everything, Edmund's journals, the previous keeper's accounts, Ezra's translations. I was looking for something, anything, that might offer a third option, a way to neither open the gateway nor condemn future generations to repeat this cycle. And I found something. A footnote in one of the oldest translations, a fragment from a civilization that had existed 5,000 years ago along this same coastline. They had faced a similar alignment, and they had discovered something crucial. The lighthouse stones themselves were the key, not figuratively, but literally. The foundation stones that had been placed by those who came before contained the mechanism that maintained the gateway. If those stones were destroyed, the gateway would collapse entirely. But there was a price. The collapse would release a massive amount of energy. Energy from a realm that operated on different physical principles than our own. The resulting explosion would be significant. The lighthouse would be destroyed. The surrounding coastline would be devastated. And anyone at the epicenter would be annihilated instantly. It was a suicide option, but it was an option nonetheless. 3 weeks until the alignment. The ocean had turned dark, not with pollution or algae, but with something else. The water itself seemed to have become denser, more viscous. Ships that tried to navigate near the coast reported their engines failing, their compasses spinning wildly. The military noticed. How could they not? But their investigations were half-hearted, confused. Whatever was happening was beyond their paradigms. They couldn't even properly articulate what they were seeing, let alone respond to it. I made my decision on the night of the new moon, exactly 1 week before the alignment. I would destroy the lighthouse. I would collapse the gateway, and I would die doing it. But first I needed to make one final descent. I needed to see them one last time, not to open the gateway, but to say goodbye to the world as I knew it. Because even if I succeeded, even if I destroyed the threshold, I knew that my life was over. The knowledge had changed me too fundamentally. I could never return to normal existence. I descended through the black water, following the now familiar path to the ruins. The city seemed more solid than before, more present, as if it was already beginning to manifest more fully in our reality. The alcoves with their terrible occupants were unchanged, but the 13th alcove, my alcove, now held something. Not a body, but an object. A container like the others, but empty. Waiting for my final journal, my final testimony. I swam past it and deeper into the complex, to the chamber where they slept, and I found that they were no longer quite sleeping. The massive forms were stirring with greater frequency now, and in that moment, hovering before them in the cold darkness, I felt something I had not expected. Pity. They had ruled this world once. They had built wonders beyond imagination, and then circumstances beyond even their control had forced them into this state, neither alive nor dead, conscious but constrained, dreaming but unable to wake. For millions of years, they had been trapped in this liminal state, and here I was, planning to trap them for eternity, to destroy the one gateway they had left, to condemn them to dream forever in the deep. Was it right? Was it just? Or was I simply choosing the devil I knew over the devil I didn't? Choosing humanity's ignorance over cosmic truth? I floated there, paralyzed by doubt, as the alignment drew ever closer. And somewhere in the depths, I felt them watching me, waiting to see what the 13th keeper would choose. The point of no return was approaching, and I still didn't know which side of it I would be standing on when it arrived.